This is Gene Krebs.
Hi there. Oh. Whoop. Whoosh.
And we're high on Ohio.
We're going around this great state. We're talking to people who know how things work, who have an influence on how those things work. And they're what I call part of the 5,000 people who actually run Ohio. It's my great pleasure today to be with my dear friend Samuel Gresham, K.A.K.A. Sam Gresham, who is known as being, yes, you're a grand poobah in Common Cause. You have a firm, Sam Gresham International.
Public policy.
You have your degrees in urban planning.
Right.
But really, I wanted to have Sam on because, Sam, you've been around here long enough, you've been seeing how things work, that you know where all the bodies are buried. They're buried face down, face up, knives in the front, knives in the back, okay? And I'm only exaggerating here slightly, but not that much. So, Sam, first of all, how did you get into being one of the people who everybody wants to get insight from? And be real honest, I mean, you and I have we sat in opposite chairs on some talking head shows. Mm-hmm. But the media will call you up and ask you for quotes because you're deemed to be wise. How do you get to be wise in well, you don't die, okay. How do you get to be wise in public policy?
You probably live long enough and don't die and open your mouth enough about issues that one day you say something that makes sense.
Okay.
And then people want to talk to you from then on. They want to know what you think. And two, you have to write a few things. Uh-huh. I don't know what it is versus audio, verbal versus written. People have more respect for written stuff. Don't ask me why.
Okay.
But they do. And I've written a few pieces that have gotten some national and international attention. I've done stuff on BBC. I've done stuff on not just here in the United States, French radio. I've done some things in Indonesian radio. I've done a variety of things, and I think I'm lucky. Mm-hmm. But you have to work at being lucky. Okay. You have to develop your skills, and I have a natural interest in history, political science, social science, psychology. So it's just a natural interest that I have. So I study it, and I engage people. I'm also not afraid to engage anybody in conversation.
Yeah, and I will tell you, you are generally associated sometimes with more progressive causes, but you are also not afraid to take on the Ohio Democratic Party when you think they are not performing. They're more interested in the politics and not necessarily in the policy. So you're from Chicago, if I remember correctly?
Yeah.
How'd you start up in all of this?
I'm actually from Greenwood, Mississippi. That's where I was born, LaFleur County. My parents were sharecroppers. Okay. And in the Great Migration, 1949 to 1958, I was a part of that. In 1958, the latter part of it, we moved to Chicago. My parents became very involved in the union. Okay. So as a part of being involved in the union, there's a knowledge gain and there's a relationship that occurs. Okay. They grow as people because they now get insight as a result of that.
Of how things work.
And I used to sit around the kitchen table or the dining room table, and they used to have all these events. All these people would come in. I didn't know who these people were, but I used to listen to their conversation. Okay. And the older and older I got, eventually they invited me to the table. Okay. When I went to college. So that's when my interest started. I was an activist on college. If you go back and look at all my dossier, I've been an activist since high school.
Now, there was one federal program, which you and I have talked about, that had a outsized influence.
Significant influence.
On your trajectory. What program?
It's the Model Cities program.
Now, if you go ahead and get out Wikipedia and you look up Model Cities program, it basically says see graft, see corruption. But it also basically, more than any other program, had as the accidental offshoot the creation of a black intelligentsia. Yes. Why? What was it? What aspect of that program was it that created the black intelligentsia? And are we still do we have programs now that are encouraging a black intelligentsia? And what are the ratifications of all of that, do you think?
Not as large as the Model Cities program did.
How did it do that?
Base. Because it created a place and allowed people who wanted to learn and gain knowledge, it gave them a place to go.
Okay.
And these people fertilized each other, and we grew, and we grew. It had an after-school program that I participated in as a youngster called 10, Tomorrow's Education Now.
Okay.
And that was helping students go to college. But it also was trying to get you to have a political mind.
Okay.
To help you understand.
The politics influences your ability to put bread on the table, that type of stuff.
And in that time, I graduated from high school in 1967, so it had a black power base too.
Okay.
And my life coaches, when you came into that system, the first thing they would do at you is throw you a book. And they say, go home and read that book. And then when you've read that book, come back and we'll have a conversation with you.
Okay.
That was their prerequisite to see how interested you were.
Okay.
And if you read the book, then they would take you in.
So it's a decision tree. Read the book, you stay. Don't read the book.
You don't stay.
Okay.
So there were lots of us who read the book, and we stayed.
Okay.
My book came, when I came back with my book, it was so frayed up, and I had marked it all up. And the book that they gave me was The Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Pablo Ferrari.
Okay.
And that was the first reading of that type of...
Light reading.
No, it's not.
I know, I'm being sarcastic.
No, it's very heavy reading, and for a high school student, I marked it up so many times because I didn't understand.
Words you'd never encountered.
That's exactly right. So when we first got back, I had a whole bunch of questions. What the hell does that mean? What's that mean? What's that mean?
That's what they were looking for.
And that's exactly what they were looking for.
So is there any program, okay, first of all, let's talk about the state then of the black intellectual in America and in Ohio. Is it thick? Is it a thin group? Are we creating more of them that can go ahead and start to address
with that community development process? Twofold. Most of the good work came from non-middle class black folk.
Explain. What do you mean?
Working class and poor people had a greater flame than middle class and elite African Americans about certain topics.
Okay.
So they wanted to write about it.
Okay.
They wanted to explore it.
Okay.
A middle class, and I call them high net worth because they're now African American billionaires, don't have this flame. Basically,
when you say that, I'm thinking of the Bill Cosby show.
Right.
Bill Cosby, his wife, and his children were part of the black elite. They went to Howard, Spelman, things of that nature.
And they became professionals, doctors and lawyers.
Yeah.
This working class, this poor people, lower middle class, had a burning desire to change
learn
things.
And change.
Change things.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, we still have a black intellectual group, you know, and this is something from the writings of Charles Murray that I'm very worried about, because now the children of the ruling elite go off to school where the other children of the ruling elite, and, you know, it becomes very status.
We have, in the African American community, we might have a much greater problem.
What?
Segregation required the middle class and the poor kids to be together.
Okay.
And there was a cross-fertilization that went on.
Okay.
We learned from those middle-class kids things that our parents didn't know. And those middle-class parents worked for us indirectly because we benefited from whatever they did for their kids in the school system.
You saw their examples. You saw deferred gratification. You saw, you know, David Rusk writes about this a lot. I reference his books a lot, Inside Outside Game. And you're also reminding me also of Payne, the sociologist who writes a lot about. But go ahead. Yeah.
So we wanted to change things.
Okay.
And we came up in the golden period, I'll be honest with you. 1963 to 1969 was a golden period for African Americans.
How so?
There was a lot of change going on in civil rights, fulfillments of civil rights. There was a lot of conflict. I mean, there were 3 major deaths during that period. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and Bobby Kennedy. And Robert Kennedy had been killed in the earlier part of that period. So there was a lot of change in America. There was a lot of hope. There were a lot of ideas. There were lots of African Americans.
So what's gone wrong?
let me just finish that thought. There were lots of African Americans going to college. And they were new at college, and they grew. What is different now is that the poor people don't have an opportunity to cross-fertilize with middle-class blacks, because most of the middle class and above blacks live in the suburbs, and poor people are isolated in the cities. They come in contact with social workers, they come in contact with teachers, but they don't come in contact with real people they could see as much as we did.
Once again, just, exclusionary housing, Section 8 housing, putting all the poor people in one concentrated area seems to be a negative impact then, is what you're saying to a certain degree.
Yes, but no.
Okay.
The one thing about putting all the poor people in one area that's good is they create support systems for themselves.
Okay.
Now, the impact on that community is not good because you have all those poor people there.
Right.
So it's a double-edged sword, and they find each other. One of the most difficult things I had to learn was that middle class and above African Americans see the world, in some cases, different than poor people.
How so?
They had to grow up they grew up with stuff. We grew up without stuff.
Okay.
So we didn't want as much stuff as they wanted because we never had that stuff. Okay, and see, most people think it's the exact reverse. If you see all that stuff, you would want to go get it.
Right.
But we never had that stuff, so we never had a desire for it.
So how do we fix all this then? How do we create a different...
I'm glad you asked that question.
Well, I have to.
There's an intersecting point that is important, and there's a structural element that we have to deal with.
Okay.
And I'll say, if we don't deal with it, this country is going to fail.
Okay.
And it's not going to just fail, it's going to collapse.
Capital F failed, not small f
Not
failed.
F, big time. It's called structural racism.
Okay.
And the evidence of structural racism is all the disadvantages that African Americans and the disparities in statistics. There is no statistic that any other ethnic group on the disparity side beats African Americans at.
Okay.
It's a structural system because I can predict by third or fourth grade how kids are going to come out. And if certain things don't happen to change that, this is the way they're going. It's even worse now than when I was growing up because we had model programs. We had support programs. We had teachers in schools who really cared about the kids. People don't care as much about kids now. It's high-stakes tests. It's political realities. It's not we want to change things to make things work anymore. It's just let me get through it. And if you look at the structural aspect, and education is a key component of that. I'll give you an example. You need at least a 500,000-word vocabulary to be successful. Now, you would hope you would have millions of words eventually. There are young African Americans walking around with less than a 15,000-word vocabulary. That portends the highest arc that they can go.
Okay.
They are limited simply by that fact.
Okay.
If somebody doesn't intervene and give them a bigger picture, a bigger vocabulary, and give them some hope, then and then we're going to create this, and it's white too now. Because Burns is writing a book about white people and what he calls they don't want to work no more.
Who's this?
The guy who wrote the Bell Curve.
Murray.
Murray. He's writing a book about white people now.
He was my first interview.
It's becoming more endemic now.
Yeah. All right, so let me ask you this question. This looks like an ordinary ink pen. It's not. It's actually my magic wand. And I got a 55-gallon drum of pixie dust here behind me to back it up. Okay? I'm going to wave it over you, Sam Gresham. You now get to require, because we're Ohio-based here in this question, the Ohio General Assembly to pass a bill to do something.
Okay.
And I guarantee you the governor will sign it. And more importantly than that, I guarantee you a 5-2 decision on the Supreme Court to back it. Okay.
So what do?
Yeah, what do you do?
I start with education. I start with health care.
Okay.
And I start with family structure.
How?
And supporting family structure. Okay, let's take education at first. I create support systems to deal with pre-K and the families of pre-K students. Give them a lot of support. I'd also work on the social, psychological, and economic issues of those families simultaneously.
Okay.
Because if you don't deal on those issues, the education will not obtain, will not structurally. Let's presuppose 75% of those kids make it through at grade level, as a result of this system. Now, you got to have after-school programs. You got to have summer robust programs. You got to have a parent academy so you can teach parents to help their kids. And in some cases where parents don't have kids that function well, you take the kids away from them and put them in a residential school. Okay?
Okay. Now, what you just said is somewhat controversial.
I don't care about that.
You just want to go ahead and,
I know what works.
yeah.
There are certain families that if you send those kids back to them, the cycle's not going to be broken.
So you're saying send them basically off to a boarding school
Right.
within the same neighborhood community,
Right.
so they can still have some interaction with their parents.
Yes.
But we give them all the advantages of what the English call it. They call it, what's the name of that school? Eton, where they all the lords and the
Where they send their kids
where
to.
they send their kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or similar situation.
Or here in America, the really elite send all their kids to Andover.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, that's true. So we do that. All right. Now, that gives that generation of kids a better chance. That's what Model Cities program did. They didn't have residential schools, but they had robust after-school program where you fed you and you learned, and people loved you. Then you had summer school programs.
Yeah.
I mean, summer programs where people taught you, you played sports, and they worked on these critical areas: math, English, vocabulary, writing. They worked on all those skills.
Do you have any idea, a ballpark estimate? Because now I'm going back and my years I spent on finance committee. My next question is, do you have any idea how much this would cost just in Ohio?
Okay, let me give you how it will cost 3 times the prison system's cost.
Okay.
All right, and if you do that one time,
You can pretty much eliminate 85% of your prison costs.
that is exactly right.
Yeah.
If you just do this one time and you get these families out. Now, I'm not finished now. The structural aspect of racism has to be dealt with too.
Okay.
It has to be dealt with because what happens even when you're successful, less than 8% or 10% of the successfully graduating from college kids are successful in the real world.
Okay.
All right, there are all sorts of things that happen to them that don't make them have or be as tough as I was or be as determined as I was. And to understand how to survive. My life coaches taught me, find people like yourselves. Get support networks. So I sought out people like myself. Find support networks. You have a better chance of surviving. You got to teach these kids the same techniques once they get out of college or once they're in college. One of the things that really devastated me when I saw the statistics, African American males graduating from Ivy League schools have a higher suicide rate than other African American males.
Why? Any hint of a reason
Yes.
why?
Because they stay in that bubble for 4 years and then they get out in the real world and they can't cut it. Because the real world doesn't treat them like that bubble. Okay?
And it's the racism and
Yeah. And see
and the subtle racism. That
no, it's overt, man.
Is it overt?
It's very,
Do we still have
oh,
overt
heck
racism?
yes. I can say to you in four instances today, even at my age, where I've run into what I could internalize as racism. And every time you come into a room as a successful African American, you constantly have to prove yourself. Now, it takes a strong constitution to deal with that. It takes a strong person to deal with that. Unless you surround even inside that constitution, you have to surround yourself
With a support network.
with a support network. And let me tell you the other thing that's important. Everybody talked about Jeremiah Wright. But African American preachers like Jeremiah Wright are very important. Because they give us coping mechanisms to deal with racism. They give us other support systems inside their church to help us deal with racism. I don't think, you don't have to go through this question. My youngest son came home to me one day and said, "Dad, what is dark skin? And what does that mean?" He's dark skinned. And I said, "Because of your skin color." Little girl said, I can't play with you because you're dark skinned. That's what the little girl, he's in second grade.
What year was this?
Oh, he's 27 years old, so it wasn't that long ago.
Okay.
All right.
Mid-'80s then.
Yeah, and I had to go through this whole thing. My son was watching television. My middle son watching television one day got up and said, "Why do all the black heroes die first in the movie, Daddy?"
Oh God, yes.
Okay.
You could always see that is like a Saturday Night Live inside joke thing now.
But these are messages that the kids get.
You're expendable.
And they internalize them.
Okay.
And even when you get out of college, there are certain industries that you're pushed to. And you go in the office, and you both know it, you'll see more African Americans in this area than you find in this area. They work in development, they work in jobs, they work in HR, they work in government, they work for development agencies, they're doing social work. But in the other principal areas, they're not there because they're channeled to go to those
Which
places.
has long been a concern of mine because it goes back to what you're talking about earlier in growing a movable black middle class. You need engineers. You know, you need business people. You need entrepreneurs.
You need artists, though, too, Gene.
Right. I'm not arguing.
You need new thinkers.
Yeah.
STEM bothers me to that extent. Because they push people who would naturally do other things and make those contributions in other ways into areas. I have more engineers working for me at the Urban League than anything else.
All right. Let me ask you, and I want to get back to that, but before I get back to that one, I want to get back to the previous one. Going back to your idea about a model cities program and then for Ohio, targeted towards, basically bootstrapping, primarily urban, African-American, young children up, and using that then to pay off so you won't need such a large prison budget.
You won't need social work either if we get rid of racism. Now,
Okay.
I'll tell you something much more radical than that.
What?
I was at a meeting in Franklin County, and everybody was complaining about poverty.
Okay.
And how are we going to stop poverty? You know what I said to them?
What?
Let's take all the social work money that y'all pay, give me all the prison money that y'all pay, and give me half of the education money, and let's just give it to the people.
Which is what Charles Murray is calling for. Have you...
Charles Murray's calling for that?
Yes. You see, you go far enough to the left, you go far enough to the right, you end up at the same spot. But I want to go back to something. In the United Kingdom, they've created something called social bonds, which is what we're talking about here, where basically rich individuals say, "I will fund your social program to long-term fix." Is we don't have so many people going off into prison. Okay, I will fix I will fund the early intervention if you, the local government, give me the money later on that you would have spent on the prisons. It's like a bond. They're paying. It's a note.
Okay.
Have you ever encountered that? And do you think the Gund Foundation out of Cleveland is intrigued by this? I don't want to speak for them. They're intrigued by this. There's some other people out there who are talking about this. How do you? Is this? On some people think of this as a way to perhaps, as somebody once said to me very bluntly and crudely, until we convince business they can make money off of fixing the poor people so they ain't poor no more, we ain't going to get anywhere. On the other side of it, saying, this is just another way for the rich ruling elite to make more money off the backs of poor people. I kind of see both ways on this. Do you have any?
Yeah, but we can't afford to continue to carry poverty at the rate that we're carrying poverty.
Yeah.
We can't.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. I understand that. And it's not good for the people who are in poverty.
Yeah.
The stress, the things that the tax that they get, the stress that they have to go through, the family destruction, it's not good. Our country can't carry it. Now, it's a very simple equation. Most of our new workers are coming from immigration or people of color
Right.
in this country.
Yeah.
Simple fact. If you don't take care of these people of color, all in the long term, this country's going to have problems.
Yeah.
So, but people don't want to deal with that reality.
All right. Let's go to the topic of racism. Go back to that just a little bit. You've experienced today 4 incidences of racism. How do you know that, and how do we fix that?
Okay, we have to do, we start, and this is what on this subject, I always start with a lexicon and definitions. Okay, you have bigotry, you have discrimination. The reason we don't understand that racism is a structure, bigotry and discrimination are behaviors inside the structure.
Okay.
So we call it racism. And the reason we call it racism is because it's easy. If we could just get along, then it would be okay. That's bull. It's a structure that advantages you and disadvantages me and hundreds of thousands of people. And we don't want to deal with that oppression and that structure. Now, let's go back to the reality of what I had to deal with today. I came out of the parking garage, I got out of my car, and I walked up to the elevator. Well, there was 2 young white girls there. When I walked up and they walked up for the elevator, I got the obligatory, oh, we're down here in the 3rd floor level and this black man is right behind me. Well, I had on a shirt and tie.
But you are the sharpest dresser I know of.
It doesn't make any difference. It's what's in their computers. They have a predisposition of color. Now, black folk do it too. Don't worry about that.
Okay.
Black and middle-class black folk do the same thing.
But I will tell you, because I'm 6'5" and 240 pounds, which means actually I should be closer to 6'9" for my weight. I can't lose weight, but maybe I can grow some more. But I will also, there are times I know I will unintentionally scare the bejeebies out of people.
No, but Gene, you are a 6'5" man, well-groomed, with a suit on. I am a 5'10" black man, well-groomed, with a suit on.
But I don't always wear a suit. Sometimes I'm in the Carhartts and my bib overalls.
Predisposition is different, Gene. I don't care what you do.
Okay.
Predisposition. They will trust you, and you'll probably kill them. They won't trust me, and I won't kill them. They won't. I mean, let's be honest.
How do we fix all this, do you think?
Well, the first thing is the people at top have to say, we need to fix this.
Okay.
You know, people have asked me that 1,000 times. The most successful corporations on diversity, the bosses at the top said, we got to do something about this.
Okay.
And they do something about it. Okay, but let me finish the rest of the story. Coming over here, I walked across the street, and I had Broad and High is an interesting
oh God, yes.
corner. But there's a famous story. A black man got beat by a police officer on the corner of Broad and High, and it flashed back to as I came across. Because he didn't stop when the police officer told him to stop jaywalking. The police officer didn't know he was deaf, but he was blind. So his reaction to that black man was to beat him up. I walked across Broad and High, and I had a flash of that story come into me, right?
Okay. Let me ask you this question then. I have black relatives, many black relatives, because I have cousins who have married a very nice African-American man. We took pains to make sure that their daughter babysat our daughters, knowing that, oh, look, our daughters knew they had a black cousin, okay? 15% of all marriages are now interracial. Is that something that's going to long-term fix this, or is that more a case of we're middle class, she married middle class, and we had our cousin who's middle class watch our daughters who's also middle class? Was that?
Gene, I think it has both a positive and negative effect.
How so?
The positive effect, it decreases the hostility from white folk if they have people married in their family.
Okay.
And it also allows people to see other people of color and not be afraid of them all the time.
Okay.
The negative aspects is outside that community, outside that group, how the wider world treats that integrated group is a different thing.
Okay.
There are still people out there, both black and white, who do not support that, and they behave like that out in the real world.
But I will say that the millennials are very open and accepting, by and large, they participate in less discrimination than their previous age groups.
Gene, my sons, I agree with you. My sons have lifelong white friends.
Okay.
I didn't. I had adult onset white friends.
Adult onset white friends. I love that phrase.
Okay. I didn't have them from childhood.
Okay.
Because I come from a segregated era. And in lots of cases, schools have helped, but haven't solved the problem. The system, the government, has not said we want to solve the problem. So even when people are willing to integrate, they're still struggling inside of a social and a political and economic system that does not support integration.
All right, then let's finish this up with one last segment, which we've not talked a whole lot about, which is the political implications of all this. In Ohio, we've not ever had a successful African-American Democrat statewide candidate. And in fact, you look around throughout the country, we have very, very few, I mean horribly few, successful African-American statewide candidates in almost any state. I mean, we have, how many black senators are there?
Two.
Two? Black governor.
And one of them is a Republican.
Yeah, Scott out of South Carolina. You've got Deval Patrick is leaving Massachusetts.
Right.
I can't think of another
There's
one.
not another one, governor after that.
Yeah, and I'm just going, I have my thought processes, which is basically that of someone sitting in this chair as to why. What are your thoughts as to why? Because I don't think my thoughts are accurate on this, because they got to be skewed, because I'm looking at it from a very particular way.
I think there are peculiar situations that create, on a statewide basis, opportunities for African Americans. The most successful state that I've ever chronicled, now there may be others, is Illinois.
Okay.
They've had 2 African American senators.
Mosley Brown
And
Barack Obama.
But they've elected 4 or 5 people statewide to Democratic positions in state government. Chu, there were a couple other people.
Yeah.
And the reason is Chicago.
Okay.
Chicago is such a dominant force in Illinois on Democratic Party and the voting of Chicago
Of Illinois.
Of Illinois.
You win Chicago, you can win statewide,
right.
and you rise up the food chain so far in Chicago, you can go statewide.
You can go statewide.
Okay.
That's the only state besides a state like Massachusetts with Deval. It came out of it, where the political process drove the election of the African American.
So, I always ask this question: how do we fix it?
It won't happen in our lifetimes in Ohio, because the Democratic Party is not liberal enough or willing to put the type of resources into black candidates. Yes, I said it.
Okay, no, I'm not arguing with you. Trust me, I've noticed the exact same thing.
The Democratic Party, as it exists right now, has tinges of racism in it, not only in its organizational leadership, but in its body politic on the ground.
All right, then let me ask you this question. I've always said, from a purely political standpoint, the reason that we've not fixed a lot of the problems we have in urban Ohio is because the black population vote is not in play.
It is, and it ain't.
How can Republicans convince African Americans in the big cities to begin to vote for them?
You know the history.
I know the history.
Before Roosevelt, black folks were Republicans.
Right.
And after Roosevelt, black folk became Democrats. Black folk are the most intelligent people on God's earth about public policy. They see when people do things for them, they support those people.
Okay.
All right. The problem with the Republican Party, and even the problem with the Democratic Party, I'm not a Democrat, I'm an independent. Okay. The problem with the Democratic Party and with the Republican Party, they see them as votes rather than as people.
Okay.
And if you see them as people, and they have they put on their pants the same leg you do. They cry, they eat, they love their families. And when you start seeing them like that, then you see them as partners, and you see they have needs and I have needs. I always come into a negotiation with anybody, corporation leaders, political leaders. This is what I need. What you need? What you need? And you tell me what you need. This is what I need. Now, if we have that spirit, we're willing to negotiate key issues, then we can win this thing. I look at it now. There is a word that we refuse to use on our democracy, and we apply it to everybody else in the world.
What's that?
Corrupt.
Okay.
All right, now let's...
Hard corrupt or soft corrupt?
It's corrupt, and it's endemically, genetically corrupt.
Okay.
All right, let me explain. If you want to get something done in state government, you got to put a little money on the table.
Okay.
And if you don't have no money on the table, you don't get nothing.
Okay.
Every form of government in the United States, county, state, city, township, federal, all function the same way. We call it a political contribution.
Okay.
And if you don't make a serious political contribution, you don't get anything. Now, the problem with black folk is they're the poorest people in this country.
Okay.
They don't have a whole lot of money. So if you make the rules of the game such, the only way we can help you is vote in large numbers. So hence, the Republicans are trying to keep us from voting in large numbers. Now, one last poignant piece about the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is cruel to African Americans.
How so?
They always tell us we have no place else to go.
Oh, gosh.
But they do.
Where?
They say, oh, you're not going to vote for them Republicans. So they treat us like you have no place else to go.
So where else do you go? Home?
That's right.
You just stay home.
You stay home. Now, one day we're going to do that. And they're going to learn the lesson, but it's going to be too late for them.
Okay.
And you know, I've heard these discussions. As a young pup growing up, I didn't say much. But as an adult, I don't take that. I say, you are being cruel to me, and you don't care about me by saying that. And that's disrespectful.
You know, I've heard quietly from other African Americans who know how things work, not dissimilar to what you've just talked about. They will not say so for the record, okay? But it's a not dissimilar conversation.
No.
And I think that until we get both parties into a bidding war,
Doesn't make any difference.
I think until then, we have to get both parties into a bidding war for the African American vote, with them proving, I have some policies that will change the dynamic. No, listen to me. I have the policies that will change the dynamic. I think what we're both seeing, what I think we're seeing, is truly what they call benign neglect by both parties.
Yes.
And it's just, we could be doing a dozen to 2 dozen pilot programs around Ohio, testing various things to see what worked and what didn't work in a variety of settings and a variety of delivery mechanisms, but we're not, and I find that very disturbing for me.
And the reason that we're not is because the political capital of poor people and people of color is very low.
That it shouldn't matter. All right, well, this has been Gene Krebs. I've been sitting here with Sam Gresham, and we've been having a really interesting conversation. I'm very happy Sam came by, because as you can see, Sam knows how things work. And if you know me, you know I have no higher praise for somebody, because there's about 25,000 dilettantes around Ohio who think they know how things work. There's just a very few number who know how things work. Sam, I do appreciate you coming by.
Thank you for having me, Jay. I appreciate it.
And on behalf of the Center for Community Solutions, we're high on Ohio.
For more about the Center for Community Solutions or their publications, please visit www.communitysolutions.com.